All right, so get this. We're going to dive into a world where battlefields are like obsolete. We're talking cyber warfare.
Yeah.
It's happening now.
Yeah.
And Andranik Aghazarian's book, Cold War 2.0, Dawn of the Asian Millennium, it's like our roadmap for this whole thing.
Yeah.
It lays it all out there. No sugarcoating, rising global tensions. The new battleground is cyberspace.
Yeah.
It's like superpowers duking it out, but not with, usual weapons. Think lines of code instead of missiles.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how Aghazarian puts this in the context of unrestricted warfare. Like, think about it. Regular warfare, it has rules, boundaries, but unrestricted warfare, it's basically anything goes. You just exploit any vulnerability to take your opponent down. And cyberspace, that's like the perfect place for this kind of thing. Right, it's like a whole new set of rules, or no rules, I guess.
Right. And Aghazarian brings up this example, the 2007 cyber attacks on Estonia.
Yeah.
The whole country crippled, but not by like bombs or anything, by hackers. Banks shut down, communications down, government paralyzed. And it was all done remotely. No troops, no borders crossed.
And that's the scary part, right? It's so hard to figure out who's behind these attacks. Like, attribution is a nightmare. So you have all this suspicion and mistrust brewing.
Right.
Aghazarian warns about these false narratives taking hold, which just makes things even more volatile.
It's like you don't even know who to point the finger at.
Right, exactly.
So we've got these shadowy attacks where it's hard to say for sure who did it. But then you've got something like Stuxnet, which was totally different.
Yeah.
This wasn't just some random disruption. This was a targeted, sophisticated operation. It was reportedly the U.S. and Israel working together to mess with Iran's nuclear program. Like, we're talking about a virus, a piece of code, actually causing damage in the real world.
Yeah. And, if you zoom out a bit and look at the bigger geopolitical picture, you can see what Aghazarian calls the Thucydides trap playing out.
The what?
Thucydides trap. It's this idea from ancient history. Basically, when a rising power, like China, challenges the dominant one, in this case the U.S., conflict becomes almost inevitable. And cyberspace. It's a key battleground in this power struggle.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a major global power shift happening in the digital realm. And it's escalating fast. Aghazarian points out both the U.S. and China have set up these dedicated cyber warfare commands. It's not just defense anymore. They're both developing offensive capabilities.
Yeah.
This is serious stuff.
Yeah, and that brings up a huge question. Where does the tech industry fit into all this?
Right.
Because companies working on things like 5G, semiconductors, they're caught in the middle. Aghazarian argues they're being pressured to pick a side, align with one superpower or the other. It's got massive economic and political implications.
It's a high-stakes game of tug-of-war, and these companies are the rope.
Speaking of high stakes, Aghazarian quotes former FBI Director Robert Mueller, who said there are only two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be. That's a sobering thought.
It is.
But Aghazarian doesn't just focus on what's happening elsewhere. He also looks at vulnerabilities here in the U.S. Like, he highlights the huge difference between what we spend on defense and what we spend on cybersecurity. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. It's like we're leaving ourselves wide open.
Yeah, and the potential consequences are pretty scary. Aghazarian brings in economist Nouriel Roubini, who predicts that cyber warfare could escalate into a global crisis. Imagine elections disrupted by, like, deepfakes and misinformation, financial markets in chaos, critical infrastructure going down. This isn't some, far-off threat. It's a real and present danger.
Okay, so it's not just about stealing information or disrupting things. It's about potentially causing real-world havoc.
And here's another layer to this. Aghazarian suggests that cyber warfare could be used as a distraction. Like, he uses the example of the South China Sea, where tensions are rising. A conflict there could be a way to divert attention from problems at home.
Right. It's part of a strategy of what they call asymmetrical warfare. A weaker opponent uses it to level the playing field by exploiting vulnerabilities in the digital world.
I see. So it's not always about direct confrontation. It's about finding those weak spots and exploiting them.
Exactly.
Okay, this is getting pretty complex.
Yeah, it is.
But it gets even more complicated when you factor in what Aghazarian calls the four rivals. That's Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. The potential for these countries to team up, especially in cyberspace, is a big challenge to the U.S.
Yeah.
Aghazarian describes this new reality as a two-lane world. We've got the physical world we're all familiar with, but now there's this digital lane running alongside it. And what happens in one can have huge consequences in the other. It's all connected. Like power grids going down, financial systems crashing, healthcare systems compromised. It's scary to think about.
Yeah.
And remember what happened with Hillary Clinton's emails?
Right.
It showed that no one is immune to these attacks, no matter how powerful or important you are.
Right.
This whole cyber conflict thing, it's got this tit-for-tat dynamic that can escalate really quickly. Aghazarian gives the example of the U.S. reportedly hitting back at Iran with cyber attacks after they shot down a U.S. drone. It just shows how easily things can spiral.
Right. And speaking of drones, Aghazarian tells this incredible story about the RQ-170 Sentinel drone. Iran managed to hack it and land it safely in their territory. It makes you wonder just how vulnerable even our most advanced technology is.
It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah, it is.
So what you're saying is that we might not be as technologically superior as we think we are?
Well, it definitely raises some questions. And what's even more concerning is that drones similar to the RQ-170 have popped up in other places. It suggests that the technology might have been reverse engineered or shared with U.S. rivals. It's a whole other level of the game.
Wow. Okay, so we've got drones being hacked, and then there's this North Korean hacking group, Hidden Cobra, or the Lazarus Group. They've been linked to some major cyber attacks like WannaCry 2.0 and that Sony hack.
Right, and what's interesting is that cyber warfare isn't always limited to the digital realm. Aghazarian points out that it can involve physical sabotage, too. He mentions reports of U.S. cyber attacks that supposedly disabled North Korean missiles before they could launch. It's blurring the lines between the digital and the physical.
Okay, so it's not just about virtual attacks. There can be real-world consequences.
Exactly.
But as we talked about before, the covert nature of all this makes it really difficult to know for sure who's behind these attacks. It's all very shadowy and deniable.
It is. And it's not just a problem with countries like North Korea. Aghazarian brings up alleged Russian cyber attacks against Ukraine, including one called Black Energy that caused widespread power outages. There's also NotPetya, this malware disguised as ransomware.
It's like they're using deception and trickery to make things even more chaotic.
Right. And that's where the concept of hybrid warfare comes in. Cyber attacks are now a regular part of global conflict, often aimed at disrupting democracies and causing chaos. Because they can be carried out with a level of anonymity and deniability that you don't get with traditional warfare, they're a really powerful tool for states that want to exert influence and destabilize their opponents.
So it's like they're using cyber attacks as a way to undermine their enemies without having to resort to a full-blown war.
Exactly. And the methods they use to achieve that deniability are becoming increasingly sophisticated. They use intermediaries and proxies, making it nearly impossible to trace the attacks back to the source.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where the pieces keep changing.
Yeah, it is.
And all of this has been made even worse by the pandemic. We're relying on the internet more than ever before. For work, for healthcare, for school, it's like we've become even more vulnerable to these attacks.
Right, it's a double-edged sword. The internet is essential, but it also exposes us to new risks. Aghazarian points out that as more services move online telemedicine, online education, financial transactions, the potential targets for cyber attacks just multiply.
It's like the more we depend on technology, the more vulnerable we become.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the weaponization of information itself. Fake news is a huge danger. It can be used to manipulate public opinion and sow discord.
Yeah, it's like they're using information as a weapon.
Exactly. And Aghazarian emphasizes that the very nature of the internet, especially with the rollout of 5G, makes us all vulnerable. It's pervasive, it's everywhere, and that means the dangers are everywhere too.
So what you're saying is that the internet, which was supposed to connect us all and make life easier, has become a new battleground in this emerging Cold War.
Exactly. And as tensions between the East and the West keep rising, that battleground is going to get even more crowded and more dangerous.
Well, that's a lot to take in. It's clear that we've only scratched the surface of this whole cyber warfare thing, but one thing's for sure, this isn't some far-off threat. It's happening right now, and it has the potential to affect every single one of us.
Yeah. And Aghazarian says the stakes just keep getting higher, as technology keeps advancing. Like, we're about to enter a whole new era of cyber warfare. Way more sophisticated, way more dangerous.
It's like we're stepping into some sci-fi movie where you can't tell what's real and what's digital anymore. Speaking of which, Aghazarian uses this really cool metaphor in the book. He compares cyberspace to a dark forest.
That is a brilliant analogy. It's vast, uncharted territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Full of unseen predators, hidden dangers. You never know what's lurking around the corner. That constant threat, the unknown, it really captures the essence of cyber warfare.
Okay, that's a little creepy. It's not all doom and gloom, is it? I mean, what can we actually do about this? Like, individuals, businesses, governments. What can they do to protect themselves in this dark forest?
Well, Aghazarian lays out this multi-layered approach. For individuals, it starts with basic cyber hygiene. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, being super careful about what you click on, what you download.
So basically just using common sense online.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes deeper than that. We also need to watch out for social engineering attacks.
Oh, right.
That's where hackers try to manipulate you psychologically, trick you into giving them access to your systems or your information.
So it's not just about having strong passwords. It's about recognizing those phishing emails and those suspicious messages and not falling for them.
Exactly. Now, for businesses, the stakes are obviously much higher. They have to invest in serious cybersecurity measures, things like intrusion detection systems, firewalls, encrypting their data. They also need a solid plan for when attacks do happen so they can minimize damage and recover quickly.
It sounds like preparation is key here.
It is.
It's not if, but when a cyber attack will happen.
Exactly. And then at the government level, Aghazarian argues for a comprehensive national cyber strategy, one that includes both defensive and offensive capabilities.
So it's not just about building walls, it's about being able to hit back if necessary.
Right. Deterrence is a crucial part of any security strategy. Cyberspace is no different. But Aghazarian also stresses that international cooperation is super important. Cyber threats, they don't care about borders. It's a global problem, and it needs a global solution.
It's like that old saying, uniting we stand, divided we fall, but in a digital context.
Exactly. We need to be sharing information, coordinating efforts to fight cybercrime, cyber warfare.
Right.
Aghazarian actually suggests we need new international norms, new treaties specifically designed to govern cyberspace, just like we have for other types of warfare.
So establishing some rules of the road for this digital battleground makes sense. But with technology evolving so fast, wouldn't it be tough to keep up?
That's a good point. Which is why Aghazarian makes this really compelling argument for continuous investment in research and development. We need to keep innovating, developing new technologies to stay ahead in this constant cyber arms race.
So it's a whole new way of thinking about warfare. Constant adaptation, constant innovation.
Absolutely. And one of the most important factors in this new era, artificial intelligence. AI Aghazarian dedicates a good chunk of the book to exploring how AI could both revolutionize cyber warfare and make it even more dangerous.
Okay, so where does AI fit in all this? Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's kind of both. On one hand, you could use AI to develop incredibly sophisticated defenses.
Yeah.
Think about systems that can detect and respond to attacks way faster than humans could ever do.
But AI is our digital bodyguard.
Yeah, in a sense. But the other side of the coin is that AI could be used to create cyber weapons that are even more powerful and destructive. Imagine self-replicating malware or AI systems launching coordinated attacks on tons of targets at once.
That's a pretty terrifying thought.
It is.
So AI could protect us or destroy us.
Right.
How do we even begin to deal with that?
Well, that's a question being debated at the highest levels right now, and Aghazarian doesn't give us any easy answers. But he does say it's crucial to have these conversations to understand what AI means for us before it's too late.
It's like we're at a crossroads. This amazing technology could change the world, but we got to be careful how we use it.
Exactly. And Aghazarian doesn't shy away from the ethical side of things either.
Right.
In fact, one of the most thought-provoking parts of the book is when he talks about rules of engagement in cyber warfare.
Because I was thinking those rules or the lack of them are what makes this so dangerous.
Exactly. It brings up some really tough questions, like what are legitimate targets in a cyber attack? Is it okay to attack civilian infrastructure like power grids or hospitals, even if it gives you a military edge?
I mean, in traditional warfare, you've got international laws, conventions to protect civilians. But in cyberspace, it seems like those lines are much more blurred.
Exactly. And what about autonomous weapons?
Oh, right. The ones controlled by AI. If an AI system launches an attack, who's responsible for what happens?
Yeah.
These are questions we need to figure out, and fast.
It's like this technology is opening up a whole new dimension of ethical questions.
It is. And Aghazarian argues that we need clear ethical guidelines for cyber warfare, just like for traditional warfare. Otherwise, cyberspace is going to be like the Wild West. Anything goes.
So we need rules of the road, not just for the tech itself, but for the people using it.
Exactly. And that takes a global effort, a conversation that involves governments, tech companies, ethicists, everyone.
One thing that really struck me in the book was Aghazarian's sense of urgency. He's not just talking about what if, he's talking about real threats we face right now.
Absolutely. And he's not alone. Cybersecurity experts all over the world are saying we're not doing enough to prepare.
So what can we do?
Well, Aghazarian says we need to invest more in cybersecurity,
Yeah.
both governments and the private sector. He says this isn't just about national security, it's about economic security too. Because if we had a major cyber attack, the economic fallout would be huge.
Absolutely. Think about it. Financial systems shut down, supply chains disrupted, businesses grinding to a halt. The economic damage could be as bad as, or even worse than, a major natural disaster or a traditional war.
And it's not just about money. It's about trust. It's about our everyday lives being disrupted. Imagine not being able to use your bank, not being able to communicate, not being able to travel, all because of a cyber attack.
It's a scary thought.
Yeah.
And it's not just governments and big corporations that need to worry. Aghazarian also points out that individuals and small businesses are becoming increasingly vulnerable.
Because we're also reliant on technology now, right? Our phones, computers, online accounts, it's all a potential target.
Exactly. And that's why Aghazarian says education is so important, making sure everyone understands the risks and knows how to protect themselves online.
So it's not just about having the latest software. It's about being smart, being aware, and taking those basic precautions.
Exactly. And that education needs to start early. We should be teaching kids about cybersecurity just like we teach them other essential safety stuff.
It's about creating a culture of cybersecurity where everyone understands they have a part to play in protecting themselves and their communities.
Exactly. And that's something we can all start doing today.
Okay, that's good to hear. So it's not just about feeling helpless. We can actually do something. Take action, even if it's small, to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. And Aghazarian reminds us that knowledge is power. The more we know about the threats we face, the better we'll be at navigating this increasingly complex digital world.
This conversation has really highlighted just how connected we all are in this digital age. Something that happens in one part of the world, online, can affect everyone.
That's so true. And it's something Aghazarian keeps coming back to in the book. We're all part of this global digital ecosystem now, and we need to start thinking and acting that way.
So it's not just about individual countries protecting themselves. It's about global cooperation, shared responsibility.
Right.
We have to recognize that our security is all connected.
Exactly. And that's a message that everyone needs to hear, not just governments and tech companies, but every single one of us.
One of the most interesting parts of the book for me was when Aghazarian talked about social media's role in this new era of cyber warfare.
It's complicated, and people don't always think about it, but social media is a big part of this conflict. These platforms have such a huge reach, they can be really powerful tools for manipulation and disruption.
I mean, we've all seen how social media can be used to spread disinformation and create division.
Right.
But how does that actually translate into cyber warfare?
Well, Aghazarian says it can be used to spread propaganda, sway public opinion, even recruit hackers.
So it's not just about spreading lies, it's about getting people to actually carry out attacks.
Exactly. And social media can also be used for denial of service attacks.
Oh, right.
Hackers flood a website with so much traffic that it crashes, basically. It can paralyze businesses, mess with government services, cause a ton of chaos.
It's like taking this tool that's supposed to connect people and turning it into a weapon.
Exactly. And Aghazarian argues that social media companies need to step up and do more to fight cybercrime and cyber warfare on their platforms.
Yeah.
They have a responsibility to protect their users.
It sounds like we need a whole new set of rules for the digital world. Rules that can actually keep up with all the changes in technology.
We do, and that's a conversation that needs to happen now.
Yeah.
Aghazarian's book is a wake-up call. He's challenging us all to think about the digital world we've created and to take responsibility for shaping its future.
This has been a real eye-opener. Cyber warfare is a serious issue. It's not some distant threat. It's happening now. We all need to be aware of it.
Absolutely. And as Aghazarian makes clear, it's not just up to governments and tech companies. We all have a part to play in creating a digital future that's safer and more resilient.
It's a lot, right? I mean, shadowy hackers, government attacks, AI weapons, social media manipulation. It's like we're living in some kind of dystopian sci-fi movie, but it's real.
It is a lot to take in. And yeah, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, even helpless. But Aghazarian doesn't just leave us there. He actually offers some hope, a way forward.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the answer to all this cyber chaos?
Well, Aghazarian talks about this idea of digital détente. Basically, it's like a set of international agreements and rules specifically for cyberspace, establishing clear rules of engagement, reducing the risk of things getting out of hand and promoting cooperation in the digital world.
So kind of like those arms control treaties during the Cold War, but for the internet.
Exactly. Aghazarian thinks that if we can create a framework for dialogue, for transparency, for understanding in cyberspace, then we can actually de-escalate things and make the digital world more stable, more secure.
Right, because nobody wins in a full-blown cyber war, right?
Right.
Everybody's so interconnected that an attack on one country could have huge ripple effects everywhere. It's like shooting yourself in the foot, but digitally.
Exactly. And that's why Aghazarian also talks about building resilience. It's not just about stopping attacks. It's about being able to bounce back quickly if one happens.
So like stronger backup systems.
Yeah.
Being able to recover data quickly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Having backups, solid recovery plans, and investing in infrastructure that can withstand attacks. Aghazarian even talks about self-healing networks, like networks that can fix themselves after being attacked. Sounds like sci-fi, but it's real. They're developing this stuff right now.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like there's some big breakthroughs happening in cybersecurity, both in terms of prevention and recovery. But technology alone isn't enough, right?
You got it. Aghazarian's really clear about that. Technology is just one piece of the puzzle. We got to think about the human element, too.
What do you mean?
Well, lots of cyber attacks take advantage of human weaknesses. Think about phishing scams, social engineering, people clicking on bad links without even thinking. A huge part of the solution is education, making people aware of the risks, teaching them to be more careful online.
It's like they say the weakest link in the chain is usually the human one.
Exactly. So we need a more, I guess, holistic approach to cybersecurity. It's not just firewalls and antivirus software. It's about creating a culture where everyone understands how important it is to stay safe online. Individuals, businesses, governments, everybody.
So it's like a combination of better technology, smarter policies, and just a change in how we think about things.
Exactly. And that takes all of us working together. Governments need to invest in cybersecurity and come up with clear rules. Businesses need to make security a priority and train their employees. Individuals need to take responsibility for their own digital safety.
This deep dive has been fascinating. A little scary, honestly. Cyber warfare is such a complex issue. It has huge implications for the future, but it also feels really abstract, like it's out of our control.
I get that. But I think the biggest takeaway from Aghazarian's book and from our conversation today is that we're not powerless. We can do things to shape the future of cyberspace.
So as we wrap things up here, what's your final thought for our listeners? What do you hope they take away from this?
I'd say this. Don't be afraid to learn. Ask questions. Get informed about the threats we face online. Knowledge is power. The more we understand about cyber warfare, the better we'll be at navigating this whole digital world safely.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, think about your own digital footprint, your online accounts, your data, your devices. What can you do today, right now, to improve your own cybersecurity and protect yourself? Because in the end, the future of cyberspace is up to all of us. It's our responsibility to make it secure, resilient, and beneficial for everyone.
Well said.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into cyber warfare. And remember, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital wild.